Today we're going to check out mountain bike pedals. I'm going to show you all of the components on them, and we're going to pull apart a few sets here just to show you exactly what goes on. Okay, so we're going to split the video up into two parts to represent the two major types of pedals. You get flat pedals and you get clip pedals, or also known as clipless pedals, which can be a little bit confusing seeing as you actually clip onto them, a little bit like ski bindings, but we'll pick that up shortly. Let's jump into flat pedals first. Okay, so this is an example of a flat pedal. Simply called a flat pedal because it's pretty flat. There's nothing else going on. And you get various different options within this, including size. Now, note the size difference in these two here. One isn't better than the other. It's literally one's going to suit your foot size a little bit more than the others. So there's different size options available. There's also different thicknesses. Now, these two aren't too far different, but you can get pedals that are very thick, you get pedals that are very thin. Typically, the thinner a pedal is, the better feel you're going to have, because it's going to be nearer to the axle. The taller you are, it's going to be a bit like walking in high heels or Cuban heels, I'd imagine. Not quite as stable. The closer you are to the axle, the better it's going to feel ultimately. Now, for the parts on a pedal, so you've got the body. So this obviously is the body design here. And within the body, you get two major styles. You get one that's flat. If you look at the profile of this from the side, it's very flat. You also get concave style ones. Now, it tends to be slightly smaller pedals that have more of a concave profile. You can achieve a concave feel with the pins on the top. And again, there's two types of pins. You get the ones that screw in from the back of the pedal, or you get grub screws like these ones, which are a bit more common, that screw in from this side of the pedal. These are easily replaceable when they break off, and you can get them in different lengths to tune the feel and the grip on your pedal. Note on this set here, I've got longer pins on the outside here, and I've got shorter pins on the middle. That's to achieve a slightly concave feel to make my foot feel like it's sitting in on that pedal. Now, all flat pedals spin on an axle. In fact, all pedals spin on an axle, and the threads on pedal axles tightens towards the front of the bike and loosens towards the rear of the bike. That is the same for both the right and the left pedal. That's to stop them essentially coming undone when you're pedaling, because you're pedaling forwards. That's pretty simple. And now for the axle system on the inside here, you get a couple of different major types. You get some that have the bearings that are part of the axle design, and others that have the bearing or a bushing as part of the inside of the pedal, and the axle slides into it. So if I just remove this axle from the body here, you'll see exactly what goes on. And so this is the axle that's inside this pedal here. As you can see, it has a smooth surface on the end. This is where it spins inside an IGUS bearing that's housed on the inside of the pedal. You get access to the IGUS bearing on this one with a little screw port at the end here. You can purge in grease through there to maintain the pedals without having to strip them apart. And at this end here, you can see there's another bushing on this end here to keep it spinning nice and smoothly. And that's a flat pedal for you. Pretty simple, eh? Okay, so now let's have a look at clipless pedals, also known as clips. Now, it's a bit of a misleading name. Clips is actually more accurate because you clip onto the pedals with cleats that are mounted onto your shoes and clip into the actual retention systems on there. So we're going to have a look at those in a sec. But the name clipless pedals actually comes from how they were designed in the first place. Now, all mountain bike pedals traditionally were flat type pedals, or bear trap pedals as they might be known in the early days. Used to have a plastic toe clip with a nylon strap that was adjusted to the size of your foot and the size of your shoe on there to hold you on the pedal. Now, this actually came over from the road world, and unsurprisingly, some mountain bike designers were looking at them thinking, God, you do not want to be attached to a mountain bike, that's really dangerous. So they designed another way of being connected to the pedals, but being able to easily remove yourself. And that was essentially the Shimano SPD, how that was born. There are loads of different options when it comes to clipless pedals on mountain bikes. You get smaller cage ones, you get bigger cage ones, lots of different brands as well with different approaches. But the two biggest contenders out there in styling are CRANIKBROTHERS and SHIMANO. So let's have a look at the SHIMANO offering first, and then we'll delve into CRANIKBROTHERS straight after. Now, Shimano really were responsible for bringing clipless pedals into the mountain bike realm. Before that, it was brands like Look from our road friends that started making the pedals that were compatible but not really designed for mountain biking. The thing that made these different from the traditional road pedals are that the shoes and the clips themselves, the way they worked. Road pedals typically have a much bigger open mechanism and a huge cleat that sits on the bottom of your shoe. You quite often see the riders struggling to walk, a bit duck-like if you ask me. Now, this was a bit of a problem because you couldn't walk in those shoes off-road, let alone do anything that you'd need to with mountain biking, like hiker biking and things like that. So Shimano designed a recess on the bottom of the shoes that these cleats would sit into. The cool thing about that is you couldn't feel them when you're walking off the bike, yet they would clip in just as well as the road system. However, there's loads of cool things when you look closely up on a pedal, so let's get a little closer, shall we? Now the actual body itself, unlike a flat pedal, doesn't need to be that big because it doesn't really support your shoe in the same way. When you're riding with a flat pedal, you typically ride with a much softer shoe. Anything from a pair of trainers up to a dedicated pair of shoes that are designed for using on flat pedals. But they're very different from a cleated shoe. A cleated shoe will have a stiff shank in the sole, and then because the fact it clips to the pedal, all the stiffness comes from the shoe. All the support comes from that shoe, whereas all the support on the flat pedal really comes from the pedal itself. Very different. And this is why you get some very small designs like this one here, where the pedal actually doesn't do anything except hold that cleat. Whereas this slightly bigger pedal, not only does it have protection in the form of these wings that sit out the front here, but you've actually got a bit of standing space on the side, so it can support a slightly more flexible shoe, which gives you a combination of power transfer and support. Now the jaws on the top of here, or the retention system, is mounted permanently to the top. You can adjust the tension on these jaws to correspond to how easy you want to clip in and out. You might think you want to clip in and out really easily, but that's not necessarily true. Quite a lot of professional riders have these almost cranked up to the max to avoid accidental clipping out when they're really going for it. Now the cleats themselves, when they're actually located into these jaws, have an amount of movement known as float. Now Shimano pedals, they have around 4 to 6 degrees of movement before you clip out, but the clip out is instantaneous. So that's why a lot of riders like these pedals, because you're almost locked in and you know exactly when you're nudging at the firm feeling when you're about to clip out. It's a very sort of positive feeling pedal, but that's also why some riders don't like them. We'll get to that with the Crank Brothers quite soon. Now the cool thing about the Shimano pedals is the axle system is a bit more traditional, and I quite like that. So the axle system on the Shimanos is a little bit different to other pedals out there in the fact that you have the bearing system, which are traditional cup and cone bearings, as part of the actual axle. Now some people these days don't necessarily like cup and cone bearings, they prefer the cartridge options, but this is actually very smart because of the fact they're very easy to re-grease. But nonetheless, it's just a different system. They work equally as well as those that have bearings in the pedals. It's just a different way of working. That's pretty much a set of Shimano pedals there. You just take the axle out there and then you have the cleats themselves. Now one last thing to say is the cleats come in two different varieties. They come in single release and multi-release. Single release means you can disengage from the pedals by moving your ankle out to the outside. They will at a push come out on the inside, so if you crash you will pop out. Whereas the multi-release, you go out at a slight angle as well as out to the sides. So they're much easier to disengage. So these would be more suitable for someone getting to know the pedals for the first time, whereas the pro riders or people who have been riding them a long time will definitely tend to prefer the single release because that is a locked in feeling that these pedals offer. Now the Crank Brothers offering is kind of the same, but just a little bit different. They've totally reimagined the way you would think about this. Now the Shimano system of having the retention system on the pedal with adjustable tension and a simple locking in style is much adopted by the bike industry. There's a lot of different brands using the same or very similar systems, whereas no one else is doing what Crank Brothers are. It's quite a different approach. Now at a glance, it kind of looks a little bit similar. You've still got the clip mechanism on the centre of the pedal, you've still got an axle, and you've still got the body around the outside with a bit of support. They also make different sized bodies for this one, for example, for more XC biased riding. It's a lot smaller, where you'll be riding in a much stiffer shoe, so you can afford to have a smaller pedal. And they do much bigger ones for the softer shoes, like the downhill riders. This one sits in the middle. Now the cool thing about this is you can't adjust the tension on the actual jaws, but the jaws themselves rotate around the body. So this makes them exceptionally easy to clip in. But what these rely on is the shoe contact on the body itself, rather than the Shimano one that has the locked in cleat feel. So a lot of people that are used to riding flat pedals transition really well to clipless pedals by using pedals like these. And as a result, actually, a lot of downhill racers like to use these pedals because you can actually move around a bit more on the pedal itself. Now the axle system is very different and the complete opposite to the Shimano one. So just to remind you, the Shimano one, you have the bearings and that as part of the axle and it just sits into the body itself. Whereas on the Crank Brothers pedal, you have the bearings in the body and the axle slides into that. So if I just take it apart, you can get a bit of an idea of how it works. You have an end cap that Literally sits on the end here just to keep the grease nice and fresh on the inside there. Very simple to service these things. As you see, the axle slides out, and you can see there's still plenty of fresh grease in there. You have two bearing surfaces, one at each end. The far end, or the outside of the pedal, has a cartridge bearing that sits onto the end here, and then you have the nut that holds it in place. And the inside of the pedal, as you can see, is a little bit dirtier because it has been used in some muddy conditions. You have an I-gust bearing, and the bearings themselves are pushed into the pedal. So pretty simple affair, but very, very different from that Shimano system. As you can see, the jaws on these, I can actually move them by hand, which you certainly cannot do with the Shimano ones. But like I said, there's two very different approaches to the clipless pedal. This one, you have the jaws that move around with the pedal, and it relies on your contact with the actual pedal itself to give the shoe feel. And the Shimano one, which has adjustable tension, a completely different thing, and it relies on the actual cleat interface with the pedal. They achieve the same result though, essentially. Now the CRANIKBROTHERS cleats are a little bit different to the Shimano ones. The shape is very different, but also you can switch them around. Now they have about 6 degrees of float, but here's the cool thing. You can tune the angle at which you clip out on the CRANIKBROTHERS pedals, so you can have either 15 or 20 degrees depending on which way you orientate the cleats on your shoes. Now this is particularly cool because some riders, let's just say an aggressive downhill rider, they might not want to accidentally clip out when they're throwing the bike around, so they might want to have the 20-degree release angle, which is actually quite a significant amount. It caters for really being able to move around on the bike. That's why these feel a lot more like flat pedals in use, but with the benefits of clipping in. But again, that's not for everyone. Some riders want that direct connection to the bike. I'm in, I'm out. Simple. There isn't a better option. They both have completely different traits. There you go, that's pretty much all you need to know about flat pedals or clipless pedals. Same but different. You still turn the cranks around with them, only you can ride these ones on a pair of trainers, and these ones you need a dedicated pair of shoes with a dedicated cleat. If you want to know anything else about pedals or anything else tech for that matter, do get in touch with us here at GMBN Tech. You can drop us an email on hellotech@gmbn.com, or you can get involved in the comments underneath this video. See you next time.